The death is announced of Dorothy Lawrence, also known as Auntie Doe, of Allen Louise Street, Laborie, who passed away at her residence on Tuesday, 30th January 2024 at 2:35 p.m. She was 98 years old. She was predeceased by her daughters, Mary and Hermine Margarita Lawrence, left to mourn her daughters, Mrs. Lauren Gaymon, Mrs. Jean Mondesi, Joan, Christine in the USVI, and Martha Lawrence, who was also a caretaker. Her sons, Trevor in the US, Nigel in Dominica, Leighton and Lynn Lawrence in Canada. Grandchildren, Lyndon Leos, Jason and Alton Mondesi and family, Mrs. Toya Lawrence Lay and family, Marlon Hunt, Rick Lawrence in Germany, Craig Deney and family, Mrs. Jessica Brown and family in St. Kitts, Pascal Lawrence in Dallas, Texas, Nigel Lawrence in Dominica, Liam Saltbus and family, John Lawrence and family, Mrs. Tessania Pilgrim and family, Shamika Lawrence and family, Mrs. Crystal Mastropaulo and family in Maine, USA, Haida Holder and family, Tyson Holder in France, and Kevin Lawrence in the USVI, Lee Lawrence and family in the US, Amanda Lawrence in the US, Keith Thompson Jr. and family in the US, Jaden and Kaylin Lawrence in Canada. Great-grandchildren, including special mention of Shia Mondesi, son-in-law Auburn Mondesi, daughters-in-law Carol Lawrence in the Turks and Caicos Islands, Jennifer Lawrence in Canada. Special relations, Dr. Adesanya Olisinda, Mr. Sylvester Anthony, Mr. Allison Francis, and Mrs. Scholastica Dasheville. Children and grandchildren of her deceased brothers Joseph Paul and Ivanus Paul of Boss Laguas, residing in Castries, Labrie and Boss, and Wells Lawrence of Millet. Children and grandchildren of her deceased sister Orlean Emmanuel of Grace V4, residing in the U.S., Mr. and Mrs. Stephen Lamontine of Ballenbush, Laborie. Other friends, Mr. and Mrs. Neela Alphonse, Miss Eudra Chico and family, Miss Elsa Joyer and family, Mrs. Mary Rennie and family, Mrs. Francilla Person and family, Mrs. Petrona Buckmeyer, Miss Teresa Hercules and family, the Paul family, the Dubois family, the Louis family, the John family, the Blas family, Mr. Tyrone Rosemont, Miss Leandre Lesporis, Miss Alutha Hippolyte and family, Mr. Curtis Jabatis, also known as Soleil, Miss Shirley George, all of Laborie, Arnold Archie Eugene, the McGay family of Castries and the U.S., the Henry family in the UK, Saltbus and Castries, the Bernard family of Ballenbush, Mrs. Imelda Petit and Mrs. Dorothy Augustina Saltbus, Mr. and Mrs. Gary Brown of the U.S., Nerville and Vance Labadie, Debbie Labadie of Safi, her relatives in Darso, the Legion of Mary and the Sacred Heart Fraternity. Nurses, Wilma John and Nusha Blas. Caretaker, Nisha St. Helen. Her neighbors, other relatives and friends, too numerous to mention. The funeral service for the late Dorothy Lawrence, also known as Auntie Doe, will be held on Friday, 16 February 2024, at the Church of the Purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Laborie at 2:30 p.m. And then the body will be laid to rest at the Lavery Cemetery. The body now lies at Lazarus Funeral Home, New Dock Road, Vieux Fort. May she rest in peace.